Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today is going to be another NFL draft grade episode, and this one is going to be for the NFC East. So once again, we'll be going through each team, going pick by pick, grading each pick, and then giving an overall grade for the team. The individual picks will just be A, B, C, D, or F, and then the overall grade could have a plus or minus if I felt one was warranted. But without further ado, we'll get into it, and we'll talk about the Dallas Cowboys. So they started off the draft with Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons obviously was one of the better defensive players in this year's draft class. Obviously, the best linebacker prospect in this year's class. They did have some problems at linebacker last year. Jalen Smith not playing up to his full potential. Leighton Vander Esch being, a little bit of an injury risk and hasn't played very good since his rookie year. So it does make some sense with their new defense, bringing in a linebacker. We really could see Leighton Vander Esch moving on from him after this season as well. So it makes some sense here. I gave the pick a B overall. I think maybe there was a couple other guys they could have gone on with, but with two corners off the board already, they just kind of went with the best defensive player left on the board. Then in the second round, they went with Kelvin Joseph, cornerback out of Kentucky. A guy that was like a second, third round pick for me overall, but if I remember correctly, he had a little bit of like off the field issues as well. I think he started off at LSU, then ended up at Kentucky, so we'll just have to see how he pans out at the NFL level. Not sure exactly how he fits their scheme as we see later on with some of the guys they drafted, but very interesting piece there. Hopefully somebody that can play across from Trevon Diggs as early as this season, but he is a B grade overall. And then in the third round, they went with Osa Odighizuwa, defensive tackle out of UCLA. He's kind of an interesting pick here. I think he's a good pick. He's a player, a prospect that I did like quite a bit, so I gave the pick a B, but they got Neville Gallimore last year, who kind of plays the same type of role if they're playing the 4-3 defense. If they play 3-4 defense, this pick makes a lot more sense, but I think they're going to play 4-3, so it's a little bit of an interesting pick, kind of double dipping back-to-back years. Then their other pick in the third round was Chauncey Golston, defensive end out of Iowa. Guy that I thought, was a fifth, sixth round pick. They took him in the third round, so it's a pretty big reach here, even though they did need some help along that defensive line, so I did give it a D overall. Then with one of the last picks of the third round, they went with Nahshon Wright out of Oregon State. Very interesting cornerback prospect, long, tall, lanky, somewhat athletic, but not super athletic. It really fits that Dan Quinn defense, kind of that press cover 3 that we saw in Seattle that, when they had the Legion of Boom and everything like that. Wright was probably a guy that's going to be a day 3 pick, but taking him a little bit here early definitely fits a position of need. Not the best pick in the world, but I did give it a C overall just because it really fit that position of need. And then in the fourth round, they went with Jabril Cox out of LSU, another linebacker. So now they have like 4 linebackers, plus they got Keanu Neal, who's going to play linebacker too. So they got an abundance of linebackers. Jabril Cox was somebody I thought probably should have gone day 2 pretty easily. So I gave the pick a B overall. Just don't think he's really going to see the field too often early on. Maybe they try to convert him to safety at the NFL level as well, since he is a little bit smaller guy that was very good in coverage. Then the other fourth round pick they had was Josh Ball, kid that got kicked out of Florida State, went to Marshall. Big, tall guy. Probably, fifth, sixth round pick, so it was a little bit early here for him, so I gave it a C overall, but they did need some depth along that offensive line. Then the fifth round, Simi Foka out of Stanford. I know a lot of people were super high on him on tape. He just didn't do much for me. Overall, I don't see a lot of things that translate well to the NFL level. Obviously, he ran that grade 40 time at his pro day, which was kind of unexpected for me because he's not a guy that really runs past people. So maybe he's that Michael Gallup replacement next year, but we'll just have to see. I gave that pick a C overall. Didn't really think it was a position of need. Didn't really think he is warranted at that spot in the draft. Then they went with another defensive tackle in Quentin Bohanna out of Kentucky. If I remember correctly, he's a little bit bigger guy. Maybe he's that nose tackle type of guy. If they go with the 3-4, could play some nose tackle. If they play 4-3, maybe plays a little bit of that one technique rotating in there. I did give that pick a C overall. I thought he was going to be more like a 7th round pick, undrafted type of guy myself. Then their other pick in the 6th round, I'm going to butcher his name, but Israel Muakamau from South Carolina. One of these other big corners, not really a guy that moves too well. Maybe he converts to safety. Press cover 3 that Seattle ran that I already talked about with Nahshon Wright makes some sense for their system, but not a guy that I was too high on myself overall, even in the 6th round. And then last but not least, they went with Matt Farniok out of Nebraska, a versatile offensive lineman, very smart kid, played a lot of games at Nebraska, not super talented or athletic or anything like that, but a good rotational depth piece that maybe you can build up and help your team out overall. And I did give those last 2 picks a C as well. Farniok was a guy that not a lot of people thought was going to get drafted, so it does make a little bit of sense there, but did address some depth issues that they do have. Overall, I did give the Cowboys a C. Really hit or miss draft for them. A lot of guys on the defensive side, but quite a few reaches as well, and then double dipping on some positions. Could be good, could be bad. We'll just have to find out. This is a draft, we could look back in a couple of years and it could end up being really good, or we could look back in a couple of years and it just looked really bad as well. So was definitely an interesting draft for the Cowboys overall. Then we'll get moved over to the New York Football Giants. And it's important to note that the Giants did trade out their number 11 pick. They traded back with the Bears. Obviously, the Bears came up and selected Justin Fields. Hopefully that trade works out good for the Giants, especially if the Bears don't play very good this year. They have a pretty high first-round pick from the Bears next year as well as maybe the Giants. So you could definitely move up for a quarterback if Daniel Jones does not work out. Then with the 20th overall pick, they went with Kadarius Toney. A lot of people were kind of high on him. Don't think they really needed him. They got Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Kenny Galladay already. They added John Ross in free agency as well. There's a lot of people out there in the community that don't really like Kadarius Toney, kind of just 1 year production, but Florida didn't really know how to use him for the longest time, converted quarterback out of high school. I gave the pick a C overall. I don't think it's the worst pick in the world, but I think there was definitely other areas of need for the Giants. Then in the second round, they went with Azeez Ojulari. They got him listed as outside linebacker here. That's probably where he's going to play at the NFL level for the Giants. Could have played defensive end as well. One of my top edge rushers in this year's class, getting him in the middle of the second round was definitely good value there. So definitely like that one quite a bit. I did give that pick an A. And then in the third round, one of my favorite corners in this year's draft, Aaron Robinson out of UCF. Very physical press corner. Played a lot of slot at college level, but I think he can play on the outside. I think he can play in the slot. Definitely going to be a valuable asset for the Giants for years to come. So that pick was an A as well. Fourth round pick, Ellerson Smith out of Northern Iowa. A guy that I like quite a bit. Had a very strong Senior Bowl after his team not playing last year because of being in the FCS, but a very good developmental edge prospect. Getting him and Azeez Ojulari together, he definitely could add some presence to that edge rush for the New York Giants. So I did give that pick a B. In the sixth round, they went with Gary Brightwell, running back out of Arizona. Not a guy that I was too high on, one of my lower-rated running backs in this year's class. Didn't think he was going to get drafted, but he had a decent pro day, and apparently the Giants liked what they saw, so they picked him. I gave it a C overall. Just building up some depth behind Saquon Barkley, who's been injured the past couple of years. Definitely not a bad thing, though. And then their other sixth-round pick, they went with Rodarius Williams out of Oklahoma State, cornerback. And he's like one of the oldest prospects in this year's draft. He's like 24, 25 years old already. He's actually the older brother of Greedy Williams, as weird, as strange as that sounds, who's been in the NFL for about 2 or 3 years now. So very good corner. The major question with him is just how much more can he develop and get better. So don't think it's a bad pick by any means. Getting some more cornerback depth and a decent player at that. So that was a B grade for him. And then overall, I gave the Giants a B+. I think it was a pretty good class for them. They got some really good players, some good values, and then the Gary Brightwell, Kadarius Toney pick, I'm not too crazy about it, but it did add some depth to their team overall. Then making that trade with the Chicago Bears and getting that first-round pick next year could be very valuable for them as well. Then we move over to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I actually feel like I like their draft quite a bit. Devonta Smith, they trade up for the number 10 pick to leapfrog the Giants to pick. Devonta Smith, my wide receiver 1 in this year's class. I know Jamar Chase is out there too. I don't not like Jamar Chase. I just love Devonta Smith. I've been on him for about 2.5 years now. I think he instantly comes in right away, becomes the wide receiver 1 for this Eagles team. I think it was a great pick. That's an A pick overall. Then they went with Landon Dickerson in the second round. Obviously, they still have Jason Kelce for at least 1 more year at center. Dickerson has some experience playing guard and tackle at the college level as well, but he has some major injury concerns in the past, so it's a little bit of concern for me. Maybe you would have been better off taking a different offensive lineman, but I still like the pick regardless and gave it a B overall. Then in the third round, they went Milton Williams, Louisiana Tech defensive lineman. Super crazy pro day for a guy that was his side along the defensive line. Maybe a little bit of a Fletcher Cox replacement in time. Definitely come in, groom him along, be a rotational piece, and really grow in that role. So I gave him a B overall as well. Then they went with Zech McPherson out of Texas Tech, a cornerback that I did like quite a bit. Probably going to end up playing a little bit of slot, maybe a little bit on the outside, maybe could convert to safety, like free safety in time as well. Definitely a very good ball skills player. I thought he'd probably go 5th, 6th round, but he ends up going here in the 4th round. I still like it overall and gave it a B. Then Kenny Gainwell in the 5th round out of Memphis, a running back a lot of people liked. A lot of people thought, he'd be like a 3rd round pick or earlier, but just wasn't quite there. Only 1 year of college production, opted out this year after several members of his family did die due to COVID. So I don't blame him there. Thoughts and prayers really do go out to his family. I gave that pick a B over. You got Nick Sirianni coming over from the Colts, Shane Steichen coming over from the Chargers, so he's going to kind of take over that Nyheim Hines type of role, a little bit of Austin Eckler type of role, but I think Miles Sanders is still going to have a very good year as well. And then in the 6th round, they went with Marlon Tuipulotu out of USC, a defensive tackle as well. I think, this is a guy that could come in, be a rotational piece as well. Him and Milton Williams could form their defensive tackle duo for years to come in the future, so definitely a good pick there as well, another B pick. Then they went with Jacoby Stevens out of LSU, kind of a tweener guy between safety and linebacker. I think he ends up playing linebacker at the NFL level, but super athletic if he is a linebacker. And I think there's a lot of upside with him overall, so I gave that pick a B as well. And then Patrick Johnson out of Tulane. They have him listed as outside linebacker. I think he ends up at defensive tackle, though. Just building up along that defensive line, really rejuvenating some of it since they do have some older players there as well with Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. They really need some youth along that line. Some of these guys that they can bring in, develop, be rotational pieces, and then hopefully one day become even better. But I gave that pick a B as well. Overall, I did give the Eagles a B+ grade. They had a lot of B picks, and then that great Devonta Smith pick in the 1st round. Then last but not least, we get over to the Washington football team. And in the 1st round, they took Jamin Davis, linebacker out of Kentucky, super athletic linebacker, a little bit raw still since he's really only been a 1-year starter at Kentucky. That's a little bit of a red flag there, but a guy that's super athletic, had an amazing pro day, really fits a position of need for them. So I did give that grade a B overall. I was really close to giving it an A. If I had plus minuses for the individual picks, it'd probably be like a B+ or an A-. Just was more towards that B side than the A side at this point in time. Then in the 2nd round, they went with Samuel Cosmi out of Texas. Offensive tackle prospect, could end up playing guard as well at the NFL level. I believe they did release one of their offensive tackles in the last couple of weeks as well, so maybe he gets a chance to play sooner rather than later. I gave that pick an A. I thought it was a very good pick overall. In the 3rd round, they went with Benjamin St. Juste out of Minnesota, formerly of Michigan, ended up transferring from there over to Minnesota. Big physical corner, can kind of run with guys too as well for a bigger corner. There is some talk maybe he moves to safety as well. I think it's a very good pick overall. I did give that a B. And then their other 3rd round pick was Diami Brown out of North Carolina, wide receiver. A lot of people liked him in this year's class. I wasn't quite as high on him. Kind of reminds me of a Nelson Aguilar type of mold. Similar body type, just kind of a deep threat. Can run a deep slant, stuff like that. But still a very unproven wide receiver at this point in time in terms of route running, in terms of his overall game. Some questionable drops at times. I did give the pick a B overall. I think it adds an element to their offense, but I'm not sure exactly how much he plays year 1. Then the 4th round, they went with John Bates out of Boise State. Decent tight end, probably a guy that should have been like a 6th, 7th round pick. They took him in the 4th round here. A little bit of a position of need, but Logan Thomas did emerge last year as well. So I gave this pick a C overall. Don't think it's crazy bad, but I don't think it's good either. Then in the 5th round, they went with Dark Forrest out of Cincinnati safety. He was my favorite Cincinnati safety in this year's draft. Obviously, there was James Wiggins, too, I believe it was. Forrest is a little bit better player overall, more complete safety. I think this definitely adds some depth to their team, especially if they do end up Landon Collins going the next year or two. So that pick overall was a B. Then obviously they got Cameron Cheeseman out of Michigan, long snappers. So you guys know how I feel about special teams players being taken before the 7th round. I'm just going to give this pick a C and be done with it. Then they went with William Bradley King out of Baylor. Listed as an outside linebacker here, probably going to end up playing defensive end for them. A little bit undersized for that defensive end role. Probably would have been a little bit better fit in a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's a prospect I do like a lot. Really had a nice Senior Bowl. And I think he's a player that could have some upside in the future. Maybe puts on a little bit more weight and still has that speed at the same time. So I gave that pick a B overall. Then a couple picks later, they went with Shaka Toney, who's almost the exact same player, just not the biggest defensive end in the world, kind of quick, but I think William Bradley King's a little bit better overall. I gave that pick a C, especially going back-to-back with similar type players. And then at almost the end of the 7th round, they went with Dax Milne, wide receiver out of BYU. He's a guy I don't really understand why he came out. I think he could have gone back to BYU, helped out his draft stock a little bit more for the future, a former walk-on there. Obviously one of Zach Wilson's favorite targets, but a lot of people were hyping him up pre-draft process, and I just never saw it with him. I don't think he's got anything that's elite in terms of any area of his game. You're looking at Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Curtis Samuel, Tony and Gandy Golden, Adam Humphries all being ahead of him, so I don't think he's ever going to see the field, especially early on in his career. But overall, I gave their draft a B. It was a pretty interesting draft. I think it was a pretty good draft as well. Overall, the NFC East, these teams all had B grades or better, besides the Cowboys, who I did give a C, who had a quite interesting draft. I think all 4 teams had very interesting drafts and had a lot of players that could develop into good players in time and really help out these teams overall. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I have for the NFC East NFL draft grades. Once again, as always, if you guys have any comments about some of these players, some of these grades, if you have any grades of your own that you think are a little bit different than mine, be sure to leave them down in the comments. If you are a fan of one of the teams in the NFC East, be sure to let me know how your team drafted this year, how you think, who your favorite rookie is out of this year's class for your favorite team. And with that being said, if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. Here at Coach Craig Sports, this channel is truly about you, the viewer, helping you guys with your DFS, whether it's NBA or NFL, helping you guys with your fantasy football teams, talking all the different football news this offseason, like these NFL draft grade videos. I'll be having the last one, the one for the NFC West, coming out tomorrow as well. And then, like I was saying, I'm going to be doing some deeper dive into Dynasty videos. I just recorded one with Dan Brown last night, who's one of my good friends. I am going to be editing that video and hopefully getting it up over the weekend as well. Definitely a very good, interesting video where we go over one of our startup dynasty leagues that we were both in together, talk about a lot of players, a lot of process and everything like that. Ended up being quite a long video, but I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. And as always, I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Definitely means a lot to me, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.